Happy you guys decided to stay with it. 7:45 on a Monday, still here. It's fantastic. And we have about 30 people registered for this session. So Laura, Peggy, we can't mess this up.
We're here because you made us.
Thanks, Peggy. That makes me feel good. I never make you guys do anything. Come on now. I simply ask.
That's pretty impressive because really nobody can make us do anything. So
exactly. Like I just ask and you guys say yes.
You should feel a little empowered in that.
No, it's like, hey guys, will you come do this with me? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. That's how that works.
Paybacks are going to be ugly.
That's okay. I owe you guys quite a bit, so.
No, I truly feel like it's the other way around, but we are a good team.
Ain't that the truth? I miss the day-to-day stuff with you guys.
Well, we miss you too.
It's fun. Well, I have some good people I got now, though. Mary's here. Hey, Mary. I'll let it go one more minute.
You just don't take any crap like nobody else.
Well, it's just because I'm stubborn. And I had all you guys with me, so it was easy. I mean, that's the fun part about when you're the staff rep with Crozier, because it's just like, hey guys, you want to go fight? And everyone's like, yeah. Okay, let's go do it. They're like, okay.
No.
I mean, how many times have you guys like said to me, hey, we're going to go do this thing. And I was like, wait, no, we can't go do that yet. You guys were ready to put a strike notice in like 6 weeks into bargaining. You're like, let's just go on strike. And I was like,
we're ready to put a picketing notice out right now.
That's what Joe said.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. Well, yeah. It wouldn't be the first time we've done big contract picketing at Crozier. That's for sure.
I think I've done more picketing at Crozier than Temple.
I bet you have, Mary. I mean, think about it. Like between DCMH, the info picket, the strike, the Crozier 5 info pickets that I've been on, plus the strike. And then like the dual actions, like there's like mid-contract picketing there that we've done. That's the first time I ever went to Crozier. I worked here for like 6 months and like, we're going to picket at Crozier. I was like, well, are they in a contract? They're like, no, they're just mad. I'm like, okay.
Well, we're there again. But I think I should close the door to make sure my husband doesn't come in.
No, that's fine.
That doesn't go well.
Good plan. All right. I think we probably can get started. I know some people are kind of wandering in. My name is Andrew Gaffney. I'm a regional director with PASNAP, and I've been with PASNAP for about 11 years. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself?
Laura Lambert. I work at Crozier, presently in the recovery room, but 33 years in the surgical trauma unit, and I am the management liaison for Crozier.
And Peggy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Peggy Malone. I am a 32-year nurse at Crozier. I'm presently in the substance abuse department that we opened 4 years ago. Previous to that, I did 28 years also in the trauma unit, and I am the vice president of PASNAP.
So just to give everybody a flavor of what we're going to do, today's presentation has 3 different sections of it. We're going to ask people to hold questions until we get to the end of a section, then we can open up and talk about some things, and then we'll kind of move on to the next one. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and start the slideshow if I can from where I am. All right. And you should all be seeing this now. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a little historical data and then, wow, I look really red. That's funny. Just some background about what happened at Crozier, how we had this committee, how we formed it, how at first it didn't do so well, and then it did much better, and how we used it to end up getting staffing grids and a bunch of other stuff in our last contract. So that's what we're going to go over tonight. So basically what we're going to do is take a look about, for those of you that have committees or have recently gotten committees, because there's a lot of folks who are in their first or second contract, and some of them just got their staffing committees in this last round. We're going to talk about what's important when you actually put that in and how to make it enforceable. You won your committee, now what do you do with it? And then making it work in the long run. and there'll be different phases for all of you. And some of you are more mature locals that have been using your staffing committee very effectively. I'm looking at Mary and Temple, which has been very effective at using their committee for years. So, you know, some of this is kind of repetitive, but it might see some new things. So basically the way the story goes, in 2015, 550 people go on strike for better staffing. They got a committee. During the 2015 strike, which Crozier had, it was the first time that they had gone on strike in over 30 years at the local, staffing was the issue. To give people some context, there had been layoffs and cuts, especially in critical care. They had shrunk entire units. They have abandoned units inside the hospital, and they made these really deep cuts to the hospital when their census dipped. And what happened is, right after they made the cuts, the census rebounded out and we couldn't staff the hospital. It was impossible to staff the building for months, and it was a mess. Coupled that with a lot of cuts to a very strong contract, we ended up in a strike. And we won a committee. So we ended up using that committee, and in this last round of bargaining that we just had, we added an IV team, we added an admissions nurse, and we got enforceable staffing grids in our contract. And those two things were directly related. The committee and the work that Peggy and Laura did and how they did it, and they're here to talk about that, and us getting what we wanted out of our contract. So a lot of you guys have seen things like this before. Generally in staffing, if you see increases and decrease, it's in a cycle, right? So you see staffing gets decreased to save money, you get bad patient outcomes, the hospital decides to push staffing back in, staffing gets increased, wait, they solve the problem, they start to see better outcomes, they say, oh wait, now we can cut staffing, and you end up in this loop, right? And the only way to really break this loop is to get enforceable staffing grids in your contract and get to the point where the boss isn't allowed to change your staffing unless you agree to it. That's the break of this cycle. What you can do if you have a staffing committee is, when you're on that downward slope and you see that staffing is decreasing to save money, you can push forward issues to the forefront to make it impossible for the hospital to ignore it. Sometimes you can add staff mid-contract, and I've seen many, many locals across PASNAP do that. Other times you have to wait till your contract and use that data as part of your contract. So, you know, why do we add a staffing committee? And that was it in 2015. And the fact of the matter is, that's what we could win. At that moment in 2015, 16, that's the best that we were going to get out of the boss. I mean, they would have gone back on strike, right? But they made sure, and when I say they, I mean the bargaining committee, the nurses at Crozier, made sure that there was some stuff in the contract that they could get. And some of this was leftover magnet stuff from their previous journeys to magnet, some of the stuff that we just wanted to put in the contract. So when you build a committee, here's just kind of the things you need to make sure of. One, you need to make sure there's one nurse from every unit. You need to make sure that they are paid, right? You cannot expect people to do this on volunteer time. It has to be a paid committee, right? You have to make sure that you are selecting the people. And I cannot stress this enough. We're going to talk about this later on, right? Bosses cannot select who is on the committee. If they do, it becomes a just paper committee for the boss to sign off on stuff, right? And the committee has to be able to set its own agenda. And I will tell you, this last round, we got all of that in our committee. And Peggy, you can speak to it, what they tried to do to it this time. I mean, they just came after it with a butcher's block. Peggy, you can talk about that, obviously.
So they wanted to dismantle it completely. And then they wanted to form a new type of committee that was going to be run by management, not by us. This committee is completely driven by us. And we do get a 1-hour time slot with our director of nursing, but everything that is brought to us and comes to us is driven through us. And what they wanted to do was not have this committee anymore. And they wanted to form their own committee, and they wanted to significantly decrease the amount of hours that they, so right now we get 6 meetings a year, and each person from each unit is paid for 8 hours. So we meet for an 8-hour day, 6 times a year. And they wanted it to be where they would pay like an hour here and there. And And not to mention that since they were not able to dismantle this, we actually got extra meetings in this. They have done nothing with their committee. They were going to run that simultaneously and nothing has happened. So again, it was just a way to dismantle us and then really not have anything moving forward.
Okay. So let's talk about Magnet for a second. If any of you guys are on Journey to Magnet, something that you should know is that you're not allowed to have magnet committees in a union environment unless the union agrees to them. If they do, it's actually a board charge because that's a term and condition of employment. And what you can do is you can basically lock in the magnet committees by getting them to agree to them. We've done this in a number of contracts. Geisinger was the last one. We just did this in January. So the magnet committees become useless when the boss gets off the journey to magnet, right? And if they're not on that journey to magnet anymore, they'll just dispose of them. But if you get in the contract, it just becomes another tool in the toolbox that you guys can bring issues for us and force things forward. So again, if you're on the journey, get everything that can, and like, it's a lot. Like a magnet committee you need unit councils, you need like based on the units themselves, you need a larger like nurse practice council, and they have a million different ways for it. But you also need a bunch of other subcommittees around supplies, staffing, like outcomes. It's a ton of stuff. And we can go through that. It'd be a whole nother day to talk about the million magnet committees there are. But again, same kind of thing where you're putting that to a contract. Make sure that you are driving the committee's agenda. That is the most important thing. And you can get that out of the boss because they want these committees to happen. And the whole journey to magnet, and people feel a lot of different ways about it. What I'll tell you is it has value as long as your boss is actually doing it the right way. Most bosses only do it the right way for a few weeks or months, and then they either try to take it over and drive it themselves, or they just do away with it. That's typically what happens. And we saw that the best example is Hahnemann, right? Hahnemann was a magnet hospital, and they did all this stuff and they had all these great things that happened. And once they got magnet, they dismantled the whole thing and nobody paid any attention. And by the time that Hahnemann decided to organize with PASNEP, they had nurses Googling, how do I take care of a patient on a vent in critical care? Like that was a magnet hospital that was happening at. So, getting this up.
It was actually a balloon pump, but.
Was it? Thanks, Mary.
It was a balloon pump. Can you imagine they sent a med surg nurse to a CICU? Patient was on a balloon pump. And she said, I don't even know how to do this. The balloon pump is a lot more complicated than a vent. I mean, the vent's complicated, but you can kill somebody in a minute with a balloon pump.
Right. So I don't know that, but I trust Mary on that one without question, and probably every other critical care nurse who can tell me all these horrible things that is. What I'll tell you real quick is that for those of you that want to work more on that piece of the contract bargaining, your staff reps will have information on this. We have a whole training on how to get committees into contract language, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. Where we want to spend a lot of the time here is the internal organizing piece, which is we won the committee, now what? And this is what most people look like after they win their committee. They're on the bus at the back of the graduate. They stormed the wedding. They got what they wanted. And now they're sitting there thinking, what the heck am I going to do now? And this is most people when they win a committee. And that's fine. That's normal. It's okay. If you don't know what you're doing, it's hard and it takes a lot of work. And where we see a fall off is between getting that committee language into your contract and actually taking it over. And Peggy, do you just want to talk about kind of the work that you did with the committee initially, getting it up and running and kind of where we were? Because I think, Peggy, we were in year 3 or 4 of the contract when you came on, right?
Yes. And
right, why don't you go ahead?
So what happened was the people who ran the committee put an awful lot of time into it. I mean, they really spent a lot of time. What happened was management kind of got their hooks on it, and what they wanted it to be was, so what they had the committee doing, for example, was they were running Nurses Day. They were building baskets, raffles for the nurses. It was those types of things. It really wasn't what the committee was intended to be. And so Leslie, our president, had decided that she was going to put some of our union officers, and Amy Cullinan and myself kind of were put into this position to kind of get it up and running to be exactly what it was supposed to be, which is driven by us. And so a lot of what it needed to be was about nurse advancement. We wanted to promote the clinical ladders. We wanted to make sure that we had members from every single unit represented. We wanted to make sure that we really stuck to this staffing and professional development piece. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an agenda every meeting when the director of nursing came. And so again, what we wanted it to be was something that was driven by us to have the outcomes that we wanted based on what was needed on each unit. And again, management kind of, because it was new and it wasn't really clear how we were going to run this. And I think it's really a good example of how you get it, we got it, and then what did we want it to look like? And so we learned from the mistakes of the 2 years that it was run. And then Leslie, like I said, our president stepped in and she's like, no, this is not the direction we wanted it to go in. And I think we're in a much better place. And again, the amount of blood, sweat, and tears those original PASNet members put into it, they did a lot of work. It just wasn't the direction that it was meant to go in.
Right. And I will tell you this is that one of the things we used to do, and I actually ended up starting and helping Peggy and Amy a little bit with the start of this committee. One of the things that we did when the new committee was formed, and first of all, Peggy, do you want to talk about recruitment, about what you guys did? Because we had seen a fall off and not every unit was represented. So you want to talk a little bit about how you guys did that?
And so Crozier previously had done a run for Magnet, and they had done all these vision days. And like Andrew said, all of a sudden they decided, yeah, we're not going to go that route anymore. And all of those committees were dismantled. And I mean, the members were pretty much devastated. They had formed relationships. They had put a lot of work into projects. So people were very reluctant now to join our committee. People were very reluctant to jump on. And so what Amy and I did was we very heavily, I went unit to unit and I called people, and I kind of made it that why wouldn't you want to join us? And we actually have a representation from every single unit now in our committee, except for the emergency room, which is always tough because they work such crazy shifts that a 7 to 3 time slot for this meeting always seems to be difficult for them to fit into their schedule. And we did have someone previously in it and they resigned. So I promise we'll get someone by next year, but we went from having, maybe 10 people come into these meetings to every single unit is represented. And it makes all the difference in the world. Everybody feels heard. Everybody has a voice. And now it just came to the point where what we've decided to do is that half the members will leave, and then so that everybody's not leaving at the same time. And it's a big struggle. Nobody wants to leave the committee. And so we have the elections in June. So we've come a long way with that. And I think that speaks a lot to what Leslie's vision was and how we wanted to see this committee go forward.
So the committee, for the first probably hour of the meeting, and I don't know how this happened, that somehow I was able to sneak into this meeting every week for a couple of months. And what we do is, for the first hour of the meeting, we literally go unit by unit and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to tell me about the biggest problem on your unit right now. But what you're not allowed to do is just vent about what's going on. You're going to say, what's the problem and what's the solution that you want out of the boss? It's got to be both. You can't just say something's wrong. And you said, this is our issue. This is what we want the boss to do. And that concrete list becomes the working list that the committee built their priorities out of on things they wanted to accomplish. And what they started to see inside the committee was like, wow, there's some universal things that are true here. Like, we're having problems with IVs, we're having problems with admissions, we're having problems with supplies, and we're having problems with staffing, right? And those 4 things became like universal. Hey, every single unit has these problems. Okay, how do we start attacking those problems? And how you start attacking those problems is you got to figure out a few things that the boss is doing, right? What do they use for staffing, and how do they use staffing models, right? Because every single hospital in Pennsylvania that's an acute care hospital submits staffing grids to the Department of Health. And what I will tell you is that if your hospitals actually followed their own staffing grids, most of you would have a pretty good day at work. The problem is most hospitals don't follow those grids, but they exist. So that's one. Every single hospital has them. They exist, and that's the staffing model they use. So you got to figure out what that model is and how it works. And that's a big part of the community. Second part, who's in charge of what? Who's the people that you actually need to get to and move? And then what does your boss and CNO care about, right? What leverage do you have over those people to get what you want? And then how can you use that? So, bed flow is something that bosses care about a lot. Readmissions is something that bosses care about a lot. Anything that's like a negative on the hospital, as far as like infection rates, things like that, all of those things are things that the boss cares about. So that's an attack point for you as the committee to go after those things. Because if you could say, okay, boss, you really care about bed flow and you really care about ED hold times, which most bosses actually do care about that. Okay, we can give you a solution. And the solution is you give us an admissions nurse. You guys care about multiple sticks, and we're going to get to the IB team here in a second. These are things bosses care about. All right. Now, and again, just very quickly, because we're already pressed for time, that the boss is going to continue to fight you after you settle your contract. And I cannot stress this enough, because it's a very cathartic thing for all of us when we negotiate agreements, especially agreements that we spent weeks, months, years doing, like that may have had a strike, they may have had actions, they may have had people get fired, they may have had like major conflict with lots and lots of things going on, right? But the boss wakes up the day after your contract is settled and they're still the same boss that was fighting you the week before. It's the same person, and keep that in your mind. So that means that you guys are going to need to continue to build up those committees. You're going to need to continue to recruit. And if you ever lax on those things, your boss is going to take advantage, because that's who they are. These are hospital administrators. They are not your friends. They are people that are there to promote the hospital's agenda, which is often in conflict with the care that you're trying to give. Okay. So really big takeaways from this piece: committee recruitment, most important thing. And before you can get that committee up and moving, use the recruitment and get people there. That's actually more important, because if you try to get the committee start up and running with all these things without building up your committee, you're going to get some trouble. So I promised we'd take a break and stop, so I'm going to do that. Do we have questions right now? People want to talk about, relate their own experiences? Anything else? I love story time. Deb, how did I know Deb was going to? Deb, I thought you might have something to say.
What I do, Andrew.
No, go ahead. What's up?
Well, at St. Mary's, we just got our contract in the end of December. It was our Christmas gift, and we're just now starting to form all these committees. And
Right, and there's a lot in your committee, because you actually have the model. So for everybody, Deb's contract has that magnet model that we talked about. So they have a lot. They have a ridiculous amount of committees in their contracts, like 5.
we do. We have a lot of committees, and the committees have committees, and
Yep.
and the subcommittees have conflicts,
Sure.
But the big ones are the staffing and nurse quality practice. The other ones kind of define themselves, but this staffing's a big thing for us. I mean, we're in dire straits right now with staffing. And I mean, I don't see it getting better anytime soon. I see it getting much, much worse before it gets better.
Sure.
So I happen to be on nurse quality practice, not staffing, but how do we do this? I mean, how do we?
Okay, so first of all, massive problems, right, that you got to shrink down. But Mary, I saw your hand up. Do you want to answer some of Deb's questions because of your experience?
Yeah, I think that everywhere in Eastern Pennsylvania anyway, there's a nursing shortage. They're not admitting it, but the hospitals are jam-packed full. I don't know. There's still a COVID surge, and if there's not a COVID surge, there's an uptick in patients because they weren't getting care for the last year. And these guys are running these hospitals with 20, 30% more patients and the same staff. And the staff is burning out and they're quitting. They used to always give us all the information, you know, how many nurses they've hired and how many left. All of a sudden, they don't give us the information on how many are leaving. It's so uncanny. I mean, like, I'm like, why did that number disappear? We always got that number. Where is it? You know? So what we're doing is, you know, 2 tracks. We have the reactive piece. So every single shift that is not staffed to the grids gets a MIDAS, gets a short staffing form on the PASNEP page. There's the short staffing forms. And then we added a new step where we're emailing the boss. I'll tell you, I just got one right now. Listen to this short staffing form. Sorry.
Mary, and while you're looking for that, do you want to I don't know if anybody knows what a MIDAS is. I mean, it's your
Okay, so
incident.
it's an incident report, right? Incident
So-
report? What do you guys call them?
People call
We
them
call
different
them
things.
Midas too.
Okay. Yeah, that's the company who does it. It's a horrible thing that's really hard to use and everybody hates it, but so I think I got 10 or 15 of them today. People are just doing them. They're just, and now we have a new, and this is our offense, is somebody at one of our union meetings said, why don't we put the number of short staffing forms in the newsletter? So we would go to the staffing and scheduling and talk about all these short staffing forms. And, you know, as we're asking them questions, it's like crickets on their end, you know. In fact, on the last Zoom call, somebody played crickets. But yeah, you know, so we're pressing them at the staffing and scheduling meeting, and they're starting to like, they just can't do, like, they can't hide anymore. It's getting really bad, just like you.
Right.
So this week, when our newsletter comes out, the whole inside is going to be all about staffing shortages. Do you guys have a newsletter?
We do have a newsletter.
It's the
We
best
don't
weapon.
have the short staffing form.
There's a couple of things here. So let's unpack some of this, and that's great, Mary. This is some good stuff. So first of all, to Mary's point, embarrassing and mocking your boss is one of the biggest weapons that you have. Use it as often as you can. 1, because it's cathartic and it feels good. 2, because they're embarrassed, and embarrassing your boss is a good way to stop behavior in general. 2, to Debbie's point, Debbie, you got to break it down and take it one step at a time, right? Your first step is to fill your committees and make sure you get the right people. And to what Laura and Peggy were talking about earlier, like, that groundwork that they did inside of their committee was one of the most important things that you can do. And, you know, I know lots of folks here have been through an organizing conversation before. Bill, oh, Bill's going to pass out. I'm going to turn his mic off. Oh, you look tired, Bill. All right.
Who, me?
You look sleepy, buddy.
I'm not tired, man. I'm
Okay.
all over it, dude. I'm listening.
All right. So I feel like a teacher calling out a student in class. This is funny.
I know, man. I'm gonna stop my video, dude.
All right. So point being is, find the right people to go on the committee. And the people that you're looking for, Debbie, are people that are, 1, obviously pro-union folks are always a plus, right? 2, people that someone go to for help on the floor, people that are willing to stand up to their manager when things are going wrong, and people that are respected by their manager. And, you know, and I will say this, because I know this is true about a bunch of the leaders on here, because I know a lot of you, you know, and I can go to Ken, I can go to Laura, I can go to Peggy, Mary, Marty. I mean, there's so many of you guys that I've worked with in the past on this call, that Lori Doman, that you want someone that your boss will respect because you're a solid worker and you're a good nurse. And that, like, I cannot stress how important that is, right? You want that person that the boss literally has to look at and be like, you know what? I may not agree with that person all the time, but she's great at her job and she takes really good care of people. And that level of respect will carry through. And it carries through when you're dealing with your boss. I mean, Peggy Malone is probably the biggest thorn in the boss's side at Crozier Chester Medical Center. But during COVID, I mean, she left her detox unit and went back up to go work ICU for Peggy, how long were you there? Like 6 months?
Yeah, the whole time,
Yeah,
the whole.
that whole first wave, Peggy was just up there, living up there. And like the boss was like mad at us because we kept like fighting with them, but they were also like, like they're kind of good people. So that's who you're looking for. Those are the people you want for the committees. And you want to pull those people in as quickly as you can. And you want to teach those people, like, if you do things with us, we can make things better, right? And that's the thing to go to right away. Other comments from folks on the floor? I don't want to move forward, but I do want to move forward. Marty, I see you.
Yeah, just briefly, Andrew, thank you. From our experience, in addition to controlling the agenda, you also have to control the minutes, or else they'll just totally gaslight you and tell you that they never said blah, blah, blah. So it's a combination of controlling what gets on the agenda and then controlling what the report back on what, which is the minutes of what happened in the conversation, so that you can follow up then and say, you said, you'd follow up with head of HR about whatever, what happened, what was the outcome, and or else you'll just end up having the same agenda over and over again and not making any progress, because they love to just like waste your time in the committees.
That's a great point, Marty. And one tool that you guys might want to consider when you do this is actually right after meetings, we're getting into the habit now of just shooting an email back to the people in the meetings and be like, this is what discussed. These are the follow-up items that we have for you guys. This is when we expect an answer back. And for those folks at Temple, Tap Juanita, who's the staff rep over there, has gotten this down to a science, because she had to exactly what Marty was talking about. She's getting like nonsense every single time. So now it's just a direct follow-up post meeting. These are the things we talked about. This is what you said. These are the action items that you have for the next meeting. And that level of, it's a simple thing to do, but it actually helps a ton. All right, we're going to move on. All right, recruit. And I just talked about this a little bit, but again, dependable, be there for the right reasons. Yeah, be there for the right reasons actually does matter. I'm not saying that some people just want a free 8-hour day, but some people just want a free 8-hour day. That's okay.
Andrew.
Yeah,
Andrew,
Peggy.
we kind of took care of that in the fact that we break into groups and have everybody has specific jobs to do and things to bring back for the next meeting. So that kind of weeds out the people who aren't serious and who really aren't committed to what our agenda is. That seems to be how we've been able to kind of get around that. And some people have left, and we've gotten some really good people on there, but it's really important. You see the commitment level when you start assigning things and requesting things.
Yeah, that's really true, Peggy. That's a great point. The other thing is, and I didn't do this, and somewhat to Marty's point about minutes, this committee just isn't an information download from the units down to the committee. It's information back out, right? And that's an important part of that, whether you're using Mary's newsletter option or you're just using the committee minutes, but you want someone who's a good communicator that will actually take what's going on to the committee back out. And that, again, it creates that level of accountability and feedback of like, oh, we said this thing was going on. It got taken to the committee and the CNO said they were going to do this. Those types of pieces reinforce that it's effective. And I will say that a million times, right? Just information down and information back up is incredibly important to making this thing work.
Debbie, we use binders. We put the minutes, every unit has a binder. We put the minutes, we have all anything we've worked on, any worksheets, they're all in these binders. So as one person leaves the committee and the next person comes on, it's a continuation. And just on every unit, it's a staffing and professional development binder. So as far as clinical ladders and things, our members can go right to the binder and find worksheets and everything that they need right in that binder. So it really was a great idea. And I'll be honest, that was started by the original people who ran the meeting.
That's awesome. I love binders. You could only
Yeah,
make it
and
better if
but
you
like I said,
color-coded it for me.
if they want to know how to get their clinical ladder, they just pull out the form. It's right there for them.
Okay.
So, and this is where, and again, this is pre-getting staffing groups in your contract. This is where you want to get to, right? Is that you're back to that same cycle, but what you've been able to do is eliminate, a bad outcome or a sentinel event because you're able to catch it first. And again, getting back to Mary's point about all those short staffing forms, right? The other piece that a short staffing form does is called transferred liability. All right. It's your fancy legal term for tonight. You're all licensed professionals, right? You have a certain liability that you carry because you're professionals. It's just part of your job, right? And you guys understand that, you have a license, all that comes with it. And you work really hard for it. So that's a big deal, obviously. When you're a professional and you take that short staffing form or an email or assignment by rejection, it doesn't matter the format that it goes, and you tell your boss, in my professional judgment, I will not be able to do my job tonight because of the tools that you've given me and the situation that you're placing me in. You are essentially transferring the liability from you to your employer. That's a very, very big deal. And if anybody goes, why do I keep filling out this short staffing form? The answer is transferred liability. Because if you continue to work in a situation where staffing is bad and you're drowning and you don't make anyone aware of it and you start taking shortcuts or you start using workarounds to get things done because it's just so busy, that's on you, right? That is on your license. That 100% is, right? But the inverse of that is also true. If you've then told your boss, I, in my judgment as a professional, am not able to do my job, it is now on them. And those forms are worth their weight in gold when it comes to defending your license, defending you guys from disciplines over like practice issues and all of that stuff. That's all a very, very big deal. All right. So Debbie, and this kind of gets back to your point, and this is using your committee to win the fights that you want, right? Pick your biggest issues and tackle those first, right? Focus your energy. And that is something that, I struggle with as, someone who works all the time in this job, because I hear a lot of different things going on at the same time. And it's hard to try and do that triage. Like, what issue do I deal with now? And I mean, Mary and I have like 100 different conversations about that a week, because there's like right now at Temple, there's always something crazy going on. And we're trying to figure out what the biggest issue and where to attack it first. It's constantly something you're going to have to deal with as union leaders, right? Data-driven fights are effective. They're more effective if you need to escalate to outside agencies. And the briefest example of that I can give you is that at Wilkes-Barre General, which is owned by a particularly horrible for-profit company called CHS, they were able to actually use short staffing forms and the data that they collected through the committee to bring the DOH in, who came in and effectively forced the hospital to increase staffing because the outcomes were so bad inside the hospital. And that had a lot to do with their trauma center, their funding, a lot of other work that they were doing. So data is your friend. The more that you can collect it, the more you can do. We're going to talk about that a little bit now, about the IB team, the admission nurse, and kind of how Laura and Peggy use data to win that fight. Laura, do you want to just talk about kind of the history and then what you guys did next?
So we have no phlebotomy and we had no IB team at all. CLAPSIs are going up. We're being scolded and told and yelled at and everything else. So we started out of the committee. We made a big graft. We put every single time we put it on a clipboard, and every single time somebody put in an IV, we asked them to record it. How many times did the stick take? How many different setups did you use? How many of everything you used? And in the beginning, they were like, seriously, but then actually people got really good at it. And we had pages and pages and pages and pages of data to say that we're wasting time, we're wasting energy, and we're wasting a lot of money and supplies with these IVs. And if we had an IV team, we wouldn't have this. We got buy-in by going about it this way through the committee. And then when we got to negotiations, we brought the IV team back up again, and we got 2 positions in the contract. And then when it went to, we started talking about actually putting the positions up, we actually turned it into 4. Now, the only thing that they did was they put a twist on the shifts, and I almost feel like they did it so that it didn't look very desirable, but we're still kind of battling that. But in the end, we got 4 IV team positions. And we also got 2 admission nurse positions, kind of the same thing, just talking about, what got done when we had them, what improvements it can make, how we can move people through the system quicker. So again, we haven't seen those positions, but we've got 6 positions in our contract.
So again, just to reinforce, it's data driven. It's somewhat like you knew the CNO wanted these things. They were kind of aware of it. So you had them over, and then you go into negotiations. And if the nurses are pushing hard on the boss and the CNO says it's a good idea, it's a heck of a lot easier to get things done. It just is. There's no question about it, right? Because essentially you have 2 people pushing against the money, and the CNO is probably making whatever argument that they're making about this is a reason why I want them to do this, right? So when you have a very obstinate for-profit company, you found an ally in that respect. Now, that CNO subsequently left the job, shocking, but it actually happened. So again, use those little tidbits that you find along the way of things that you can get, and get what you can get out of them in the committee, but also understand that some of these big ticket items and they're staffing grids that are enforceable, they're positions, because jobs cost money. They do. So if you're going to put a position in, you're raising cost. Great. But that's something that you're going to look for negotiation. On the short side, inside the contract, you're looking for defined processes when things are going wrong. And that's another piece. So the best example I can ever give is folks say, I never have supplies on my unit. And I know that everybody on this call has heard that. So the question is, when you don't have supplies on the unit, who's responsible for that? And the committee needs to find that out. Okay, this person's actually responsible for putting supplies in the unit. Okay, good. Now start doing data-driven facts of this is what we don't have. Why don't you have it? And this is all work that the committee should be like, why isn't this process working? Because the administrators all believe that their hospitals are shining lights on the hill, everything works like clockwork, and nothing ever goes wrong. That's where their heads are. So find out who's in charge of it, why doesn't it work? And then force yourselves to be disciplined on continuing to put the same pressure on the employer. It's not always going to work. It's always going to be driven by budget cycles and everything else. But at some point, if you just keep focused on it, that's going to be a piece that's going to be effective. So Peggy, do you want to talk about kind of the next step that you guys are doing in your mentorship program? And just to frame this, Crozier at this point has 520 members. It should be almost a 650 person hospital. We are down that many jobs. We are down like literally 100 positions. It's insane. And I know a lot of your other hospitals are actually experiencing that. So this is kind of the next initiative that they're working on.
So the nurse mentorship program is something that both sides recognize there's a desperate need for it. As most hospitals are feeling, these new nurses are coming in, they're getting their experience and they're going. And so what we have devised is, and again, we broke down into small groups. We researched what mentorship programs looked in other places. How would the mentor be paid or compensated? What would it mean for the mentee? There's all different types of mentorship programs. And so what we're working on now is to find what would be the best fit for Crozier and what would be the best fit for us. And again, it seems like something simple, but you really have to, how will you meet? When will you meet? How often will you meet? Will it be someone from your unit that the unit that the new orientee is working on, or someone from a different unit? Like there's so many different, and we didn't even realize it when we opened this can of worms, but when we recognized how important all of these little facets were to developing a good mentorship program. And now we are in conjunction now with our education department. They also feel that it's really important. So now they are also contributing onto what they feel would be valuable. And so it's a huge collaboration. And again, like I said, everyone recognizes that it's necessary, but how we narrow it down and we make it work and make it effective, that's what we're working on right now. And it's kind of exciting and it's a nice challenge. And like I said, everybody working on it on all the different units has really jumped on board with it. And again, in June, half of our members will be replaced, and they're disappointed to not be able to see this through, because it is something really to look forward to in the future. I think we will have a significant impact on retention this way.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize, I saw Amy. Amy Coleman is actually the chair of the committee down there. Amy's daughter just got married and she was away. She wasn't sure that she'd be able to attend, but I see that she just popped on. Amy, do you want to add anything in now that I put you on the spot?
Well, no, actually, Peggy and Laura have done a wonderful job speaking about all of this. Well, I think that the mentorship program is just so important. And that was one thing that we really wanted to make sure that we got started before our 6 meetings ended this spring. I think we have until May and then we're done for this year. But I did miss this last meeting, and I know Peggy and Laura took it and ran with it, which was wonderful, and getting it really going. And then the exit interviews, of course, was another thing that we talked about that we really wanted to get going also. And it has started, and I really am looking forward to see how that goes, because it'll be very interesting.
Amy, and Debbie asked a question, which I don't know. Who's actually doing the exit interviews? I don't even know.
The exit interviews are going to be done by, the directors are going to let the committee know when people are leaving. And it will be somebody from the committee, not just one particular person, but it could be any of the people from our committee that would be doing it. It's just like a, just a peer to peer, and sometimes you can find out a lot more peer to peer than you can when you're talking to your manager.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Do we have any other folks that have questions right now? All right.
Can
Well,
I talk for 1 second?
yeah, of course, Laura.
When we were talking about the minutes, we kind of learned that they tried to turn our minutes against us a little bit and would look really close at the amount of time that we spent on our sharing section. And they decided to present us and tell us that we spend too much time kind of complaining in the meeting. So just note on that we're very careful what gets put in the minutes and how much gets shared in the minutes. And, that we try to stick to time frames that, make it, because even when we're doing that, it's still productive, but your minutes can maybe not come across the same way. So I think that point was really important, that the minutes, you need to really look at what you're putting out, because a lot of people are going to look at those minutes, so good point that they really matter.
And again, just the last piece here, this is what your timeline looks like. You negotiate, form committee, gather data, prepare for the next, and then, repeat every single time. And again, to Peggy's point, they really came after the committee in our last negotiations that it took a strike to get. And what that means is that it works. So can I see it? So again, you're going to have to be prepared every single time to go back and defend your committee. And to what Laura's point, I think to Marty and some other folks that already talked about as well, it's really going to be an important thing to get. Ken?
Yeah, we seem to be having a lot of trouble holding administration to what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, with COVID especially, we're in a staffing crisis. They can't hire people, so there's not enough people to fill all the slots that are supposed to be filled. And we keep losing staff. They hired 2 nurses in 6 months, and half of that left right after orientation. So we're really having trouble with it, and that's the big excuse is that they can't get staff to come in and interview, and it's becoming a problem because we have staffing on units that's now half of what it was supposed to be originally.
Yeah, and Ken, I think that, you're in one of those unique places as you're transitioning to go into your contract. One thing that you guys want to might start focusing on is, the question is, why are we not able to retain nurses at Eagleville? Obviously, it's a unique facility with a variety of services, not only, obviously, your detox and rehab and hospital and Jerry psych and psych, like you're a unique situation, unique building. But like, what are you guys going to need to retain and recruit people in? And then that's got to be the start of the basis of some of your proposals this time around to go to the boss. And again, your employer knows that they can't staff the building and they're probably not happy about it because they're worried about sentinel events. They're worried about, psych is one of the most regulated departments that you can get to from the Department of Health standpoint. And, data collection at this point, because you guys are up, what, September, I think?
Yeah, we're up in September. So we've been arguing back and forth with the administration for quite a very long time. They don't hear us. Well, I mean, they hear the words, but generally they have for a long time told us that based on their exit interviews, the problem is that the staff are too mean to the new people who are going through orientation. They talked about this one scathing letter that they received from a nurse who left. And after hearing about it for months, one of the administration left a letter sitting out on the table during a labor management meeting. And when I read it, I was like, well, their interpretation of that letter is far, far from what my interpretation of the letter was. It's essentially the staff person who was going through orientation was able to see what was going on around her. And she realized that when she left orientation, she was going to be stuck out there somewhere alone and felt that she could not handle that. Administration keeps saying, oh, the nurses are just being negative, and that's making everybody want to leave when they first get in there. But people see how people are being held accountable for things they have no control over when you're by yourself and taking admissions and a whole lot of other things that you're still not familiar with.
And they're doing the same thing to us. And that's why we were hoping that these exit interviews could show, no, here's why they're leaving. They're leaving because it's unsafe, because, they're not given anything that they need to do this job, and they feel like they're going to lose their license or worse yet, kill somebody. That's
Right.
why we were hoping the exit interviews would really be proof as to what's going on, because they say the same thing to us. It's because of you guys. You're so mean. You eat your young. You're da da da. It's always our fault.
Right. And Ken, remember, you're kind of on the escalating chart of union power. Like you guys are starting that like long, slow upward, roller coaster, tick, tick, tick up to power, where you guys are starting to really, what I say, get to a point where you're going to be able to force your boss to do something, right? Because you've been trying for, months now through the COVID, through 16 months at this point, right? And you haven't gotten very far. And you've got to realize that you're hitting that window of opportunity when you negotiate a contract that you can actually make some change. So what you guys have to do at this point is generate the data that you need to back up your facts when you go in and get as much of it as you can over the next couple of months. So when you hit negotiations, you can hit them hard. And that's going to be your best bet.
Okay, well.
It's a long road, I know, man.
But it's attainable. We fight every day, but we fight because we know that it's attainable. Our patients are worth it. Andrew, can I just say one more thing about the committee?
Sure.
So there's some other things about the committee that you can really do some great thinking outside the box. Laura, as a trauma nurse and one of our case managers representatives, found this need that families were coming to Crozier and they didn't really know where to stay when they had a loved one in the trauma unit, and there were no really good places to eat, or how do you get food on off hours? And so Laura and another nurse and a couple other people on the committee ran with this. They developed this beautiful little sheet of paper, and the actually administration jumped right on it. We got it approved, they laminated it, and it's in all of the units. So when we have families and visitors and they start asking these questions like, hey, what's around or where can we go? Because, we really are in a kind of isolated location there. It was such a great tool and it really helped a lot. And that was all generated right out of our committee. We got no pushback. All we got was positive feedback from that. And they're the little things that you can do that really help boost the committee. So that was a real positive thing. And then the committee was really excited to do more. Like, what other things can we do? And those little wins are what really help this committee become stronger and stronger.
And the other thing is, they want us all to be against each other. There's like, there's one from every unit. And so pretty soon we're all united and everybody has like a new friend in a new place and they've got 3 more friends. And the next thing you know, we're stronger and stronger because we're united and they realize we're all on the same team. And, everybody thinks, oh, your unit's great. You don't understand this. Well, they hear that we have the same exact problems. They might look a little bit different, but they're all still there. And I think it really strengthens all of us. I mean, like, we're in all the group chats with them and people can bounce off issues and we bounce things off of each other. And I just think it makes it all around better for all of us.
Lauren, that's another good point. We have a WhatsApp with every committee member on it. And so if a question arises, it comes out on the app. And then those of us, if it's something that has to go to an officer or steward, we have it right in front of us. We guide them to go to the next place. It really is so much more than just staffing and professional development. It really is a strong committee if it's done well. And we're working really hard to keep it that way.
Peggy, and I would say that what you're talking about really, just for everyone, is using the committee to essentially build the union. Right? And that's really what you're talking about. You're talking about you're creating another layer outside your stewards and officers who are doing all the yeoman's work of representing disciplines and trying to enforce the contract. And now you have another layer of support around. And I can tell you that when we did the contract negotiations, like you could feel that because we already were so deep on all of these units and all the work that you guys had done, it made it easier for us. Caitlin, I want to jump over to you. I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I work over at St. Chris, and a big thing we have right now is that turnover, which is something we never had before. When I was hired in my original unit, I was the first person hired in 6 years. People never left St. Chris, and now everyone seems to drop like flies. And the big problem, especially in my unit where I work, is our orientation is 6 months. So you can't really just have somebody, thrown in and working in a level 4 NICU on their own. So my question is kind of 2 parts. One is we don't do exit interviews at all. So I'm not even sure how that would be something to initiate because I think it would be very helpful. And then 2, as far as the mentor program goes, that's something else we don't have that I think would be very beneficial in my unit, especially because, we had a new nurse. She was with us for 7 months. She was fantastic. And then she had her first death and she left because she couldn't do it in a NICU. So we just don't have enough support. And like I said, we literally just don't do exit interviews. So they don't really seem to know what's going on. So nothing's ever changing.
Laura, Peggy, do you want to answer kind of how you guys got it started or anybody else?
I mean, we got it started through this committee and talking to each other that, yeah, this was a problem everywhere. And it started with our step down unit lost, somebody did research, 38 nurses in 2 years left their unit. And we presented that. Of course, they said, no, that's not true. This one really transferred because they wanted to go to an ICU and they had all these reasons why. But really, the point was they lost a ton of nurses. So I think you somewhere need, a base of people to say that this is important or to come together. Maybe you could do it with your union officers even as something that they want, to put through and to see why. And, if you present it as we're not doing it, to be bad. We're doing it to be good. We want to try to figure out what we're doing wrong so that we can change it. You know, that everything we do somehow is held against us. But in the end, we want it to be a better place to work. We want it to be a safer place to work. Like, we're not the enemy. We want to fix it. We work here. This is where our families come. This is our community. And so that's something that we always try to stress too, is they don't believe us, but we're doing it for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons.
And
Yes.
to devise the questions, why people are leaving. And so what we kind of did in this committee was we backtracked, why they left, and then you backtrack and start asking the questions. And then we came up with a whole list of our own questions that we wanted in our exit interview, based on the reasons we knew. And I'll be honest, sometimes we're very surprised by the answers. What we thought were the answers in these exit interviews are not what we expected, but you just have to devise the questions that are appropriate for your setting. And that if you sat down and thought really long and hard, you could come up with 15 questions pretty quickly. And that's just what we did. And that's where we started, and we jumped from there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Thanks, guys. Other questions from folks? Look at this. It is 8:45. We are hitting the post on the nose, because that's how we get things done here at PASNet. Very timely. Anything else before we break? Looking forward to see all your delegates tomorrow. I'm going to give you the 30-second pitch tomorrow. Make sure you guys change your names as you come in, because there's about 5 people in the studio that I'm in Ben Salem right now. We have to check 120 people off in the morning to make sure all the delegates are where they need to be and can vote. So do us all a favor. You guys are doing great. Make sure your names are up there. It'll make our lives so much easier. Other than that, I really appreciate everybody taking the time, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good
Thanks,
luck.
everyone.
Yeah, good night.
Feel free to reach out to us.